Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippine, and welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. If you didn't know, I'm going to be doing a live stream from 6 to 7 on September 7th. So at this point, that's 5 days away. The season's getting that close. It's crazy. But make sure you stop by for that. It's here on the YouTube channel from 6 to 7 Central Time. And we are going to be just kind of hanging out, just getting really hyped for the start of the NFL season. I'm going to have some stuff like in my notes planned to talk about for the Lions and Chiefs, but for the most part, we're just going to hang out, talk about the game and the rest of the season coming up. So make sure you tune into my channel for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. But today, anyway, you're going to be tuning into this video where I'm going to be breaking down my standings predictions for the NFL for the upcoming season. The way I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to start with the AFC. I'm going to break down, first of all, my 1 through 7, my playoff field for the AFC. And then I'll go down division by division and I'll rank them 1 through 4 just so that we can talk about all the different teams quickly, the teams that aren't going to make the playoffs as well, and just you can see each division where they stand. And then I'm going to be doing the NFC. And at the end of the video, we're going to be talking about my predictions for who will be in the title games for both of these conferences, and then also who will be in the Super Bowl and who will win. Let's start off here with the AFC. And here in the AFC field, we're going to start out with the number 1 seed, and that is the Bengals. And I think the main reason why I have the Bengals at number 1 is I think that the 2 and 3 and 4 are, well, the 4 I think is just slightly a level below the other teams. And then 2 and 3 I think have just slightly harder schedules than the Bengals have. Obviously, the Bengals have the Ravens in their division, and then they have the Browns and Steelers, which, to spoil a little bit of the rest of the video, I'm not too high on the Steelers or Browns this year. So I just think that the Bengals have a slightly easier schedule. I have them winning this division because I just feel like Joe Burrow and Chase, that combination, is going to be better than ever this year. Obviously, their defense was not the main storyline of last year, but also I think it was strong enough to get them to that point. And I think this year it's also just as strong and able to get them to that level. Obviously, the offensive line is going to continue to be a concern for Burrow, but it didn't stop him from having one of the more prolific quarterback seasons in recent years for Joe Burrow last year. Joe Burrow, I think, is going to lead this team to another division victory, and because of the strength of schedule of the rest of these teams, I think I have them at the number 1 seed. Now, here's where we have number 2. This is the boldest take that I have had all off season, and I've been waiting until this moment to tell you because I think everyone's going to be so mad at me. I have at number 2 the LA Chargers as the winner of the AFC West. This Chargers team is a team that I've believed can take their game to the next level and can truly become elite. And they're just another one of those teams like the Vikings where they have great seasons in the regular season and they just can't quite put it together in the playoffs. And Justin Herbert last year did struggle in that game against the Jags, but I don't know what it is, but when I watched the end of that game where the Jags had finished that comeback, they were running onto the field celebrating, the way I saw the Chargers react, it wasn't defeated in the sense that I'm like, man, this is going to affect them for years to come. It was a defeated in the sense that I was like, they're going to be back with a vengeance. I just have a weird feeling about them next year where they are going to make some serious impact in this AFC. If there's any year to pick the Chargers to win the division, I feel like it's got to be this year. Justin Herbert coming off of his new contract extension. Herbert, I'm thinking, is going to take a huge leap this year. I think a lot of people are now hating him for just the fact that he was paid money has now automatically made people dislike him more. And I feel like that's not fair. I think that he is not quite into the elite category of quarterback going into this season, but I think he's going to be at that point at the end of the season. I think he's going to be a top 5 in MVP voting this year. I have such high hopes for the Chargers. Austin Eckler brings that offense to the level that it was last year, and it's going to improve to one of the more elite offenses in the league this year. And I feel like it's only a matter of time before this defense finally finds its way. You know, the Chargers defense hasn't been awful in the last few years, but this defense could be elite. You've got Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa as the edge rushers. I mean, just that alone should strike fear in the hearts of other teams, but it kind of feels like they haven't quite been able to put together healthy seasons. I think it turns around this year. I think the Chargers put it all together this year, win the division, because I think there's a chance the Chiefs might have a few offensive regressions. Again, I'm not saying I think they're going to be a bad team this year. I just think that if there's a year for the Chargers to sneak past them for a year, I think it's going to be this year. At number 3, we have the Buffalo Bills. And this is a team, again, where I feel like they could be 1 or 2, but it's just the division. Man, we got the Dolphins, we have the Jets, we have the Patriots. Just so many good teams. Like, there's no really bad team in that division. It's going to be a tough battle. And there's going to be a lot of teams, I think, in this division that are much better than their record says they are. So I think the Bills, coming off of a season where they had a really rough loss in the divisional round, and people were so critical of that loss, but let's not forget that loss was against the Bengals, which people are saying is one of the better teams this year and was last year as well. So it's not like they lost that way to some bad team. They lost to a team that people going into that matchup thought they easily could have lost to. It's just the way they lost was kind of deflating. But this Bills team certainly still capable of going on a run this year. Obviously, I honestly think that the Stephon Diggs stuff is a little overblown with him, getting mad at players and everything. That's just the way he is. That's his personality, his passion and flame for this game of football. I think the Bills' defense is also capable of being better than they were last year. I just think this whole team can pull it together. And, you got the last year with the Damar Hamlin stuff. That was definitely shaking the team up. I think there were a lot of things working against the Bills last year. I think they turn a lot of that around and get the 3 seed, win this division, even though it is a tougher division this year. Next at the 4 seed, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think that this is a team that is going to pretty clearly win their division because of just how awful this division is. But I do see the Jaguars, last year, people forget they were a 9-8 team and they made the playoffs just because, again, last year their division was so bad. And this year I do expect them to improve. I just don't think they're going to take a leap. So that's why I have them winning one extra game. I think they're going to be right around 10-7. And they're definitely going to be capable of making some noise in the playoffs. I just think that these other teams are still a little bit better than them. And that's why I feel like they deserve that 4 spot. I think that they did make some improvements, and also let's not forget that Calvin Ridley is still a good wide receiver. Like, obviously, there's some speculation. Obviously, we got to see what happened with him because he did miss an entire season of football, and that's never good. Let's not forget that when he was with the Falcons before he got suspended, he was a really good wide receiver, and adding him to that wide receiver core in Jacksonville is going to make a huge difference. I feel like they shored up some things on defense. This Jags team is going to easily win this division. I still feel like they deserve the 4 spot again this year, though. And then unfortunately for the Jags, because I have the Chargers at 2, the Chiefs are the number 5 seed that they would have to play in the first round of the playoffs. There's reasons why I picked the Chargers over the Chiefs, but the Chiefs are still an amazing team. They're still very capable of winning that division and being the 2 or 1 seed. But for my purposes, the Chiefs are 5, and they're going to be one of the best 5 seeds in recent NFL history just because of how stacked that division's going to be. Obviously, the Chiefs still have Patrick Mahomes. With Patrick Mahomes, you can win the Super Bowl any day of the week. Well, specifically Sunday and specifically in February. But you know what I'm saying. Any given year, you can win the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. And they, yes, have not really addressed the wide receiver room. They've got a lot of young guys that are going to make their mark. He's going to give them a name, and he's going to make them someone that people are going to recognize in the future and make a name for themselves. So yes, I do think that the Chiefs are going to be still a really good team this year, despite those wide receiver concerns. But just a couple of concerns in that department made it all I really needed to put the Chargers ahead of them this year. But I think it would be really fun to watch Mahomes attempt a full playoff run from the road and see if he is able to get the job done. I think that would be a really fun postseason to watch. In the number 6 seed, we have the Baltimore Ravens, and this is a team that I think could definitely be a big challenge to the Bengals if everyone stays healthy. along with the fact that we're not always 100% positive that these veteran players like Odell Beckham Jr. are going to mesh with their new team. And sometimes it works out fantastic, other times it doesn't work out quite as well. And also the Ravens, they have options at running at wide receiver, but if Odell Beckham doesn't work out, I don't feel like they have many legs to stand on. And Lamar Jackson will hopefully have a leg to stand on by the end of the season, but he has also a lot of injury concerns in the past few years. Can he stay on the field for a full season is the question, and if he can't, then I have to put them down at 6 or 7. And if he does stay healthy for a full season, I think they could legitimately threaten the Bengals in the AFC North. But I feel like 6 is a pretty comfortable spot for the Ravens to be in with their history, but also with the potential they have this season. Next, we have the New York Jets. And this is a team that, I was trying to think about whether or not I wanted them in the playoffs this year, but I just think their defense is too good to not put in. I think that they've got, Sauce and some amazing guys on the defensive line, Quinnen Williams. I think that the offensive line has obviously been the main point of Hard Knocks, but then we've got Aaron Rodgers passing to Garrett Wilson. I'm not the kind of guy that hated the Packers so much that I'm just going to say that Rodgers is going to suck wherever he goes. I don't like the guy, but I will admit, he's not just going to go to a different team and just fall off the face of the earth. And yes, he didn't perform the way that the Packers needed him to last year because he did have a rough season. Regardless of how little he had at the wide receiver position, he could have been better last season, and I think we can all agree with that. But let's not forget that he is still Aaron Rodgers. He's still going to make those crazy passes, and now he has a wide receiver to throw to and a couple good wide receivers to throw to. You've got a two-headed monster at the running back position. I mean, the offensive line's a concern, but Aaron Rodgers, I trust to deal with those issues and deal with the offensive line. So I think the Jets are definitely capable of making the playoffs, and I feel like they deserve that 7th seed. So now let's just quickly go down the line on each of these individual divisions, and we'll start with the AFC East, where I have the Bills in the playoffs already. I talked about them. I have the Jets, and then I have the Dolphins. The Dolphins are one of the first teams out that I have in this conference. They're a team that I definitely think is capable of honestly threatening the Bills in that division, but it's just, I'm sorry, I put the Dolphins in one of the teams that I'm rooting the hardest for this year, specifically because of Tua, and I want to see him succeed. But still, I have those concerns just like everyone else. I want to see him go back onto the field, be fully healthy, and play. But just the amount of concussions he had last season, I just don't know. And I don't think that this Dolphins team is capable of making the playoffs with a third string QB. I just don't know. I didn't want to put them. The AFC is so stacked this year. To have the Jets as the 7th seed, there's some crazy good teams in the AFC this year. In past years, I probably would have put the Dolphins in the playoffs, but the concern with that is just too high. I couldn't put them in there. And then the bottom spot in the AFC East, I actually had the Patriots as the other team as my top 2 out. The Patriots are a team that I just think they're going to be close, but not quite there, just like they were last year. I think that Bill Belichick has that ability to make any team really good enough to almost make the playoffs at least, or if not make the playoffs. And I think that Mac Jones is what Mac Jones is. I think he is a quarterback that is a guy that's never going to be horrible, but he's also not going to be great. And I think this is the average of average teams. So I feel like they deserve this spot, which is crazy that they're 4th, but it's just how good this division is. Next, we have the AFC North, and I already talked about the Bengals and Ravens. The Browns are one of the hardest teams to predict, honestly, this year because they got Deshaun Watson, who didn't play for 2 straight years. Last year, he had kind of a good run to end the season, but it just was kind of such a slow ramp up, and I don't know if he can play to that full potential anymore. I also don't know. I mean, we didn't see a whole lot of this team last year. We didn't really see what the potential was because Watson was barely playing, and it's difficult to put kind of a marker on how good they'll be. But I feel like the Browns will be kind of a 7-win team this year, but they could probably get above that point, and they probably could end up tanking this year depending on what happens. And then at 4 in this division, we have the Steelers. I just don't see the hype around the Steelers that I've seen all season long. I don't understand it. I just don't get the whole Kenny Pickett thing. He had a kind of a good end to the season, but he played okay last season. And people are now going into this season acting like he's going to take some huge leap and be this amazing quarterback. And maybe he will, but I just don't get how that's kind of considered just the way it is now, like as if that's a given. There's no given in that at all. And so I just don't know if I'm going to trust the Steelers to win a whole lot of games this year until Kenny Pickett proves that. They obviously still have a good defense, and Mike Tomlin's one of the better coaches in this league, but I got to see more from the Steelers this year. In the South, we have the Titans, the Colts, and the Texans, and these are all teams that are kind of in this mode where, and I guess I'll kind of lump them all together. They're in this mode where they've got a new young starting quarterback, potentially. Obviously, Will Levis, we don't know if he's going to start for the Titans or not consistently throughout the season, if he is going to be the future or not. The Colts have their future in Richardson, at least that's what they believe right now, and the Texans have C.J. Stroud. All these teams are kind of just trying things out to see how it's going to go. The Titans did gain DeAndre Hopkins. It kind of seems like they're going to try and do kind of a reload / rebuild or like a competitive rebuild type thing. I don't think they're going to be competitive, but it seems like that's what they're trying to do. And then on the Colts and Texans side, I feel like the Colts are just on the edge of a rebuild, and the Texans have already established they're in one. So kind of an uneventful AFC South this year. Plenty of good storylines, but in terms of standings, not very eventful. And then we have the Broncos and the Raiders that we haven't talked about in the AFC West. Broncos are number 3 on my list, and then the Raiders are at the bottom of the division. The Broncos I really just put above the Raiders because although I hate Sean Payton, and I hope that the Broncos are the worst team in this division, and even the whole league this year because of how much I hate Sean Payton. And if you want to hear me fully rant about that, watch my other video where I talk about the teams that I'm going to be rooting for the least this year. But I still have to give credit that Sean Payton can transform this team. And as annoying as that it was that Sean Payton made the comments he did about Nathaniel Hackett, I feel like as a fan, I do feel like he did have one of the worst coaching jobs that I've seen in recent years. Nathaniel Hackett did. And I do think that Sean Payton can turn this Broncos team around at least enough to get 6 or 7 wins out of them this year, or maybe even more. And on the Raiders side, I feel like they might just stay the same as they did last year because there was some turnaround. They switched out Derek Carr with Jimmy G. I don't really think that made that big of a difference for how I feel about them this year. I just feel like they're one of those teams. And also, let's not forget they lost Darren Waller because Darren Waller was a huge part of their offense. Obviously, Josh Jacobs is going to win them some games that they wouldn't otherwise win this year after he signed that new deal. But I just don't know about the Raiders. They could surprise me, but I see them as one of the lower teams in this conference. And then to round out the AFC predictions, I'm going to say who's in my AFC championship game, and that's the Bengals versus the Chargers. And I'm going to say that the Bengals win this game. I think the Chargers deserve to be in this spot based on how good I think they're going to be this year. And I think a lot of you were expecting me to say that the Chiefs were going to end up just beating the Chargers in the playoffs anyway, so that my prediction could be viewed as less bad. But I'm sticking to my guns here. I think the Chargers are going to be a great team. I think that they can beat out the Bills if they play a home game. I feel good about them this year. And then on the Bengals side, I think they're too good at home, and just that offense is really built for the playoffs. They're a momentum driven team that just takes any opportunity and runs with it, and their defense can get them to this point. So I say the Bengals beat the Chargers in the AFC Championship and move on to the Super Bowl. So now let's move on to the NFC, where I'm going to start off with the Eagles and the number 1 seed. I think that this is kind of a given for most people anyway, unless you somehow see Jalen Hurts falling off. I do think that sometimes it happens in the NFL these days where players just immediately get extensions after having a couple good years because the team's afraid that they're going to start looking elsewhere and not participating in training camp and everything like that. And I don't think that this is a situation like that where a player doesn't get what he deserved, because I think Jalen Hurts did show what he needed to show in order to get that extension. But I see why people might say, oh, well, Jalen Hurts is going to have his year where he comes crashing down to earth. If people say that, that's probably the reason why. But I do believe in Jalen Hurts. I think he's going to be a good quarterback in this league for years to come. And then that combination of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith is just insane. So that offense is going to be great. The defense is going to somehow get better. I feel like it's kind of thin at cornerback, but other than that, they're stacked. They're stacked. And the 49ers, I also have at number 2, just like last year. I think they will find a way to win that division again. And it's as simple as this. Every year, people say that the quarterback's going to be the reason why the 49ers don't do what they did the previous years, and every year they're proven wrong. You know, with Jimmy Garoppolo, people are saying, well, Jimmy Garoppolo's not that good of a quarterback. This 49ers team isn't going to go very far with him after he kind of came crashing down to earth a couple years ago. They still managed to get to that point. There was that year where everyone was hurt, but that was more of the injuries. And then last year, Brock Purdy came in, Mr. Irrelevant. And I'm not trying to discredit Brock Purdy and what he did, but also it was just ingenious scheme and great players around him. I genuinely feel like any quarterback could come in and be successful with this 49ers team. And so there's no way that I can pick against the 49ers winning the division. I feel like I'm going to pick them until they lose the division and something changes. Next, we have the Vikings at number 3, and this is one where it's a point of contention because I do think the Vikings are undervalued right now. I do think that there's kind of a very high low. There's a extreme is what I'm trying to say between what people think in terms of people saying that the Vikings are either going to be a serious Super Bowl contender or there's people that are saying the Vikings aren't even going to make the playoffs. And I feel like, honestly, this is one of the teams where it makes the most sense to be right in the middle of those two, and no one seems to be at all. I feel like you either have to be fully for the Vikings and think they're going to be one of the better teams, or you think they're going to be barely making the playoffs or even not making the playoffs. Whereas I feel like it's pretty comfortable to say they're going to be either a strong 10-7 or an 11-6, where they are going to have a legitimate shot at winning the division. If not, they'll probably be a 6 or 7 seed in this conference. I think it's going to come down to one of the last couple games of the season. I honestly think that first home game that the Vikings play against the Lions is going to be the big one. And then obviously the one at the Lions will be huge too. But I think the Vikings will find a way to win this division. I think that saying that they're going to go from 13-4 to missing the playoffs is a bit extreme. And then there's people saying that the Vikings defense, it's like there's no way that they're going to be able to repeat this. They're going to miss the playoffs. But how come you're not saying about the Lions, though? Because the Vikings and the Lions are very similar teams this year. They have amazing offenses with incredible potential to be even better, and they have defenses that couldn't stop a thing last year. And I think people are willing into existence that, oh, the Lions can overcome those defensive struggles and be a good team and ball out this year. But then when people think about the Vikings the same way, then all of a sudden they think the defense is going to be some huge reason why we completely drop the ball this year and don't even win more games than lose them and miss the playoffs. So it's like people just kind of want to pick the Lions over the Vikings. I don't think there's a whole lot of logical reason why the Lions are going to be that much better. I'm not saying you can't pick the Lions over the Vikings. I'm just saying if that's your reasoning, then that's not very fair, I think, to the Vikings and might be kind of overhyping the Lions a little bit. The Saints are at number 4 for me. I think that that division, the NFC South division, could go multiple different ways. I just feel like I got to pick the Saints because they have some returning veterans on the defensive side. I believe in this Saints defense more than I believe in the other defenses in this division. And let's not forget, Derek Carr is still a decent quarterback. He's not the best, but I still trust him over the other quarterbacks that are in this division right now because right now we're looking at Desmond Ridder, which I think he definitely could be good this year. Like it's his first year being a starter though, so I don't know if I want to trust him quite yet to lead his team to a division victory. Bryce Young, who again it's his first year, I can't trust him yet. And then we have either Kyle Trask, who's a rookie, or Baker Mayfield, who has had one good game that people all of a sudden are saying he's back when he had that really good game against the Rams. That's the only good thing he's done in who knows how long. So those are the quarterbacks going up against Derek Carr. I don't know about you, but even though Derek Carr is a pretty, as the Gen Z kids say, mid right now. God, I hate that I said that. Even though Derek Carr is a pretty average quarterback who is sometimes going to do some special things, but for the most part is going to be pretty consistently average, I still trust him more than the other quarterbacks we have in this division, so I think I got to put him at 4. The Giants are the number 5 seed for me. I actually have them higher, or the second highest in the division for the NFC East, and we'll talk about that more later. The Giants, I think, are only going to continue to get better. Daniel Jones really introduced fully what he can do running the football this last season, and I think he's going to make that an even bigger part of his game this year. I do think that Daniel Jones is going to get even better this year. I think he has even better weapons to throw to. Darren Waller, I think, is going to revamp this offense and make it a top 10 offense in the league this year. And so I think that the Giants are going to be a very strong 5 seed this year. Their defense also got better, so I believe in them a lot this year. Next at 6, we have the Detroit Lions. And I know that as a Vikings fan, I'm not supposed to root for teams in my own division, but I'm going to be rooting for the Vikings ahead of the Lions, don't get me wrong. And if the Lions being knocked out of the playoffs is what needs to happen for the Vikings to make the playoffs, obviously I'm going to be rooting for that every day of the week. But if the Vikings are already in the playoffs, or if the Vikings have no shot at the playoffs, I'll be rooting for the Lions wholeheartedly. I feel like the fans deserve it. The city deserves it. They have to get to this point. So I'm happy to say I predict the Lions to still be in the playoffs, even though I feel like they're kind of overhyped right now. I still see them being a 10-7 team, potentially a 9-8 team, and I think that gets them the playoffs in this NFC. And I think that their defense is very suspect, but also offense is kind of king at this point in the NFL. I think that this offense is going to carry them to a good amount of wins this year if they can get to that consistently good point that they were at the end of the year last year, because they can't just start off the season really bad again like they did last year. Then we have the Seahawks at the number 7 seed, and I think this will be a better Seahawks team than last year. I just think that the 5 and 6 ahead of them are just too good for them to move up. I think the Seahawks will end up being also a 10-7 team this upcoming season, with the Lions, I don't know, some tiebreaker. I didn't say the exact win totals of all these teams, but the Lions would have it over them on some sort of tiebreaker in my scenario. So the Seahawks will be a slightly better team this upcoming season. I think that the Seahawks started off super strong and they kind of started to fall down to earth last season, and the timing of that was just kind of bad, where they ended up just getting demolished by the 49ers in the first round of the playoffs. I do think this will be a slightly better team with Geno Smith coming into his second year in this offense and in the system. And let's not forget about Jackson Njigba. I think that he is going to be a important member of this team this year. I think he's going to make a bigger impact next year, but he adds to an already good offensive roster. I think the Seahawks at least deserve a playoff spot this year. So now let's get into the divisions exclusively now. The 49ers, Seahawks, Cardinals, and Rams in that order in the NFC West. The Cardinals I have at 3 over the Rams, just slightly, because I still feel like Kyler Murray has some left in the tank. I feel like he has a lot to prove this year, and it's at least going to get them a few more wins. I think Kyler Murray doesn't want the Cardinals to get a higher draft pick this upcoming year, because it probably means it'll be his replacement. So I think if he can win enough games for the Cardinals, he can try and make his case for why he deserves to stay with the Cardinals this year. And I think that's going to be a big factor. And then the Rams, obviously Matthew Stafford is still the starting quarterback of this team. I feel like with his injuries, he's got some irreversible stuff now, and it's tough for him. And the Rams are just seemingly kind of starting to tank a little bit. And they still have some good players on their team, which made it surprising they lost as many games as they did last year. I feel like they'll probably end up at that same point at the end of the season. Next to the NFC North, we already talked about the Vikings and Lions. Nice representation of 2 teams in the NFC North in the playoffs this year. The Bears are number 3 for me, followed by the Packers at 4. And I have the Bears at 3 because I do think they're going to make an improvement this year. I definitely feel like Bears fans are overhyping them incredibly hard, just like they do every year, honestly. But the Bears, I think, will at least improve their offense enough. And their defense also did improve, but I think that the offense will be the name of the game for them this year. Justin Fields, I think, will definitely have a better year this year. I do believe in him to be the quarterback of the future for the Bears, and he has had a really rough go of it in terms of what he's been given to succeed in the first couple years of his career. I think that DJ Moore being added to this roster is going to make a big difference for Fields to have him as another option to throw to. But I also think that Darnell Mooney is going to have a transcendent year in becoming a much better wide receiver in this league. So I do think this offense is going to be a major improvement from last year. And I think it's enough for them to maybe go from 3 wins last year to even 6 or 7 wins this year. I just don't think that's going to be as dramatic of a leap as Bears fans seem to think. And then we have the Packers at number 4. I need to see more from Jordan Love because the Packers were a 8-9 team, I believe, last year, or were they 9-8? Either way, they missed the playoffs and were right around that mark. And then that was with Aaron Rodgers. And I truly still believe Aaron Rodgers is a good quarterback in this league. So, and then you throw in Jordan Love instead of Aaron Rodgers, and I think it's unfair to say that he's going to suck because I think the media wants to think he's going to suck. But also, it's an overreaction as well to assume he's going to be good. So it's kind of one of those in between things where we have to kind of wait and see. And the Packers lost too many good guys over the last couple of years for me to feel like they're going to win much more than 6 or 7 games this season, unless Jordan Love balls out and proves that he can be an all-star quarterback for them. In the NFC South, we have 3 teams that are going to be missing the playoffs. I think the Falcons and the Panthers are in very similar situations. They're trying to get a feel for what their identity is going to look like with their new quarterbacks the next few years. The Falcons are going to be my number 2 team. I feel like Desmond Ridder is going to be a good quarterback, especially with the kind of offense that I feel like this team is going to have. So I feel like the addition of Bijan Robinson, is going to make a big difference in this offense. Obviously, Cordero Patterson was a great jack of all trades for them, and he is still going to continue to be on the team. But I feel like Bijan is a great 3-down back that's really going to take the pressure off of Desmond Ridder. And I think that pressure being taken off is going to help him push that down the field a lot more. And I feel like this Falcons team will be a sneaky team. And I see them winning 8 or 9 games this season. I just don't think they're going to be quite good enough to take this NFC South. And at number 3, we have the Panthers in this division. I think that Bryce Young is going to be a great quarterback for them, but it's going to take a year or two for him to get up to that point. Obviously, also, he doesn't exactly have a team around him that's good enough yet to compete for a championship. I think it's just a wait and see year for the Panthers. Throw in Adam Thielen, the veteran wide receiver, and I think this team is just going to be decent this year. They could upset a few teams this year, win 6 or 7 games, and they just are trying to see what their identity will be in the coming years. And then the Buccaneers, I have at the lower part of this division. I feel like this is the calm before the storm that's going to happen next offseason. They're going to go from last year being kind of a disappointment. This year, they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league after so much turnaround. They have enough good players on their defense, I think, where they'll win at least a few games. But I definitely think they're going to be in play for that number 1 pick and potentially getting Caleb Williams because Baker Mayfield is not going to be the long-term solution, and I don't think Trask is going to be either. I would love to see him perform this season, but if Mayfield doesn't work out, the Bucs are going to be bad this year. It's as simple as that. The NFC Championship this year, I have a little bit of an upset in the conferences. So in this model, it would be the 49ers beating the Seahawks, and then the Vikings and the Lions. And I hate to say it, I think the Lions are going to beat the Vikings. I hate to say it, I'm sorry. I think the Lions are one of those teams where they're such a solid pick for like an upset in the playoffs, at least in the first round. And I don't think they'll get further than that, but then they'll get stomped by the Eagles, and that will mean the Giants would play the 49ers, and I have the Giants beating the 49ers. So that means the Eagles versus the Giants in the NFC Championship. I think the Giants, again, I have really high hopes for them this year, but I do think the Eagles are going to outgun them. They're just too good. That sets up the Super Bowl, the Eagles versus the Bengals. These are two heavyweight teams, two teams that have recently lost a Super Bowl, so it would be a really good matchup. And drumroll please, I have the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. Hate to say it again, as a Vikings fan, I don't want to see them win the Super Bowl. I would much rather have the Bengals win the Super Bowl, but they're just too good this year. Jalen Hurts, I think, is going to ball out again. Their offense is just incredible, a crazy combination of guys. They somehow got DeAndre Swift on their team now for this upcoming year. They have two great guys at wide receiver, amazing defensive line that's going to stuff the run, and then even though their cornerback position is kind of their weak spot or their weak link, so to speak, their secondary is still pretty decent. I mean, it's crazy that that's the worst part of their team. So the Eagles are just too good. They're going to overpower every other team in this league, and I think they're the Super Bowl champions for this season. So that was kind of a long video. I apologize. Please let me know what you think in the comments. We are 4 or 5 days away now from the start of the NFL season. I just can't wait to get it all started. I hope you are too. Again, make sure you check out my live stream on the 7th. I'll give information for that in the description. But thanks again so much, and I'll see you on the flip side.